Welcome to Commsverse. This session is Chatbots in Microsoft Teams Made Simple, presented by Matt Wade.
All right, thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everybody from upstate New York. My name is Matt Wade. I live a couple hours north of New York City, and I'm very happy to be here today to discuss building chatbots, both in Microsoft Teams and actually elsewhere. Thankfully, the platform is something that lets you drop your bots wherever you really want to, as long as a channel is available to you from the Azure side of things. So real quick to start, many thanks to all the sponsors. I've spoken at a number of different conferences over the last few years. This is probably one of the biggest turnouts I've ever seen. I'm sure the current situation of many people working from home and not being able to attend conferences in person has had an impact, but wow, is this not just some really great turnout. So make sure to check out a lot of the information about these sponsors within the Microsoft Teams setup, which again, an amazing setup actually by the Commsverse people. For the, just information architecture, being able to find all the different forums and different discussion places, and also being able to talk to some of the sponsors here. A little bit about me before we start. My name is Matt Wade. Like I said, today's session is going to be on building chatbots and basically natural language processing interactions within Azure, which can be surfaced in Microsoft Teams. So we'll talk a lot about Teams, a lot about chatbots, and a little bit about where else you can be seeing some of these chatbots, especially from a use case perspective. If you have heard my name before or have seen some of my work, it might be for the periodic table of Office 365. Probably the reason that I'm able to call myself the Microsoft MVP. But that is not the topic today. We're not going to be talking about Office 365. Really, we're going to be talking about the Azure side of things. And we're going to kind of be diving into what is essentially a new paradigm of computing. Human interaction with machine is changing a lot. If you haven't seen the evidence yet of people talking to their devices, just ask your iPhone what time it is, or let Alexa know that you want to add something to your grocery list. Which some of those use cases are actually quite simple and sometimes disappointing, to be frank. But if you really want to see it, look at the next generation. Look at the Zoomers. Look at the children of today, frankly, who are now becoming sort of one with their devices, and they are able to speak with and interact in a very human nature or human way of interacting, which even to me, I'm in my early to mid 30s, and I don't necessarily have that kind of relationship, even though I kind of work in the chatbot realm on a day-to-day basis. But the next generation is looking at this as being what they expect. And it's really going to be something that provides a lot of opportunity for automation, for smart experiences with customers, internally, elsewhere. And it's something that Microsoft has really invested a lot in. If you look at what Azure offers already, the ability to do some really high-end computing with relation to a skill set that has long been non-achievable, right? Being able to speak to something, it being able to understand you correctly, and being able to move forward with an action based on what you say. And you're going to see a lot of that in the future, I'm sure, from Satya, from his team, and from the rest of the Azure and O365, M365 folks. So why would you even want to look at a bot? Other than the fact, cool, it's the new paradigm, it's something you should be looking at. There's a lot of practical solutions out there already. I look at this sort of as a three-step process, or a three-win process here. The first is going to be when you go in to talk to a chatbot, whether you're actually chatting with your fingers and typing, or if you're talking to it, that bot now is just one endpoint. And instead of having to go look for things, say like in an intranet or on a website, or kicking off a process in some web portal or on an app, you can actually just ask that endpoint to go do something for you. You as the user have no knowledge or need to even have knowledge for what it's doing in the background. So you're able to go out and reach out to a number of services that you may already have. And that's really what this first one here references, this show me. It gets added value out of the services you've already invested in. If you're like any organization out there, you probably have dozens of different on-prem, cloud, hybrid solutions out there. Sometimes you can't upgrade certain ones because there are prerequisite upgrades that are required. That doesn't matter in the chatbot realm, because most of these solutions are going to be able to ping whichever system you need to get information from, whether you're updating it, creating it, deleting it, or just reading it. You're able to do so, and the user doesn't have any idea whatsoever that you might have hit 4, 5, or 6 different systems just to get one answer or to get one lookup, because depending on the situation, it might be old data that sits on an on-prem system that hasn't been upgraded yet, or it might be something in a brand spanking new cloud service that you've signed up for. So you have a ton of opportunity here to clean up the experience for the user, so you're not telling them to jump between a bunch of different services, app hop between different tools that happen to be the way that a human would be required to do it, when in this case the bot can actually go out and take action and do it themselves. The other big thing is knowledge management. I spent a lot of time in my career at this point as a knowledge manager, somebody who organizes information, makes it accessible. I'm not like on the PhD level side of it. I don't look at it from the sake of for knowledge management for the sake of knowledge management. I really look at it for the sake of like the end user and how can I make their day a little bit faster, more efficient. And the knowledge tools that are going to be coming from the Azure side of things are really, really cool, because it's a mixture of that natural language processing with being able to connect to whatever the answer is to the question that the person asks. And third is going to be the action. So this and the first one, the show me, are very much tied together. You can't really go to other services unless you call a logical workflow to go do so. So whether you're going to be custom coding this or doing something in a low code or no code workflow tool, you want to be able to understand the request that's coming in and then kick off the action. That action can have steps that go into those other services. And this is essentially where all those connections to those other services that I mentioned earlier are coming from. And it's a big deal to make sure that you want to make use of the action side here. And I say that not just because it's cooler, because it is, but it's also much more high value when you get into the action-oriented aspects of chatbots. And one thing that I see a lot of times when I'm speaking to customers and to other folks in the industry who have, kind of dived into the whole concept of chatbots within, well, any platform, whether it's Azure, whether it's Alexa, whether it's Watson, take your pick. A lot of the times people kind of just jump in and say, here, I got my fact bot going, my FAQ bot, and I'm good to go. That is not the case. If you want to actually make some real impact, the knowledge is step one. Building that knowledge base is usually pretty easy. Expanding it, making sure that it works correctly is going to be, a project. It's not something you're going to do within a day, especially with the natural language aspect of it. You want to make sure that certain queries are going to get to the right answer. And if they're vague, it's going to ask for clarification and how you get there. But really the next step is going to be, hey, on my restaurant website, online, you asked me what our hours are. Would you like to make a reservation at our restaurant? Based on the fact that we're open until 9 p.m. tonight, and I say this as being an upstate New Yorker where we are actually able to go back to restaurants at the current time, putting in that lead generation opportunity to say, hey, would you like to make a reservation? Well, making a reservation is not something that is a knowledgeable response. That is an action-based process that needs to go out and connect to the system that you're using to do that, whether you do it through Yelp or OpenTable or just a spreadsheet, whatever. Being able to tell the bot, yes, I do want to do that, actually. That's a great idea. Thank you for the nudge in the right direction. Let me get a table for 2 at 6 p.m. tonight, and we look forward to seeing you then. The bot goes through the process, confirms that those times are available, comes back and says yes, sends you a nice confirmation email. All those steps that I just went through, those are in the background. Those are happening in the action-oriented side of the bot. That is not going to be something that would be coming from the knowledge side, which is essentially where people get started. If you want to go out there and learn more about the FAQ spot, you will find probably dozens, maybe even hundreds of videos on build an FAQ bot in 10 minutes on Azure. Absolutely accurate. You can build an FAQ bot on Azure in 10 minutes. The time-consuming process is getting the content in there. It would be like saying, build a team, Microsoft team in 10 minutes. Absolutely, no problem. But whether or not you built the correct information architecture, the channels, the folders, the file setup, all of that is going to depend on how good you are at sort of building it out from the background. So the one kind of big takeaway when it comes to action versus knowledge is don't just rest on your laurels of I built a good FAQ bot and instead of taking action, I give somebody a link to the form that can go take that action. Use the bot itself. Make the experience in the bot good so that people stay there and they want to continue using the bot in the future. A good bot experience will bring people back. A bad bot experience will keep them away forever. So you want to make sure that it's a good UI, a good UX, and people appreciate it. So when you go forward and you want to build out your first bot, or second, third, fifth, 112th, you want to make sure that your bot is able to do 3 things, sort of the 3-legged stool of a successful bot architecture. The first and probably going to be the newest for most developers out there, is going to be the natural language processing. So that's the understanding what's coming into the bot. And then the bot has to know what to do with that content. Did the person ask me a knowledge question? Do I send them back some answers and just come back with static text and maybe a little bit of formatting here and there, or a link to something, or do I go and kick off a workflow? And that's really what the whole process is that's here. It starts with the natural language processing, and then it kicks it over to either the knowledge source or to the correct workflow it needs to kick off and actually run through the steps that it's going to do. In the back end, you're looking at bot service and Azure bot service, Microsoft bot framework for building the bot itself. I will say I'm actually not a developer. I'm very much on the change management and adoption side of things within Microsoft 365. But as long as you have the ability to build some workflows, in my case, in like sort of a no-code, low-code sort of way, you are actually perfectly able to build a chatbot without any sort of additional, skill set outside of a little bit of logic and let's say the ability and want to learn a little bit more. The sort of nouveau skill that you're going to be getting into here is really going to be the natural language processing and making a language model that makes sense and is successful and is able to respond when it doesn't understand something. So I'm not going to spend much time talking about the workflow aspect or how you would do it, but I am going to spend some time on some demos showing you how those bots would look coming back and forth in their questions, answers, things like that. When we do actually break this down, the understanding for the most part is going to be coming from an Azure service that's called LUIS. LUIS stands for Language Understanding Intelligent Service. You may see it just as called Language Understanding, but the formal name is LUIS. That's actually the tool that's going to then kick off a workflow. That's going to be the do part. When it comes to the knowledgeable aspect, it actually has its own language understanding built in, and I'll show you what these tools look like from the back end so you can see just actually how easy they are to use and update and maintain. But QnA Maker is going to be that knowledge source. So with QnA Maker, you're going to basically give your knowledge base in QnA Maker a list of different ways to ask a question, and then one correct vetted answer that either can provide an incentive to click a button to go forward and kick off a process, or maybe provide a link to the full source because it's a longer answer, but I just gave you the TLDR, the too long didn't read response. And then if you do actually go forward and kick off the workflow from LUIS, because LUIS is what's going to be used to do that, you are going to be essentially doing coding or connecting to a low-code, no-code solution. So generally speaking, most chatbot builders these days are going to be using Node or C#. For all the demos that I have here, these are going to be actually using Microsoft Power Automate, which is one of the members of the Power Platform within Microsoft 365, Office 365. And on top of that, Microsoft only in the last 6 months or so revealed a fourth time in the Power Platform, which is the Power Virtual Agents. So that's sort of a kind of like a Power Automate meets a little bit of a lower power version of LUIS. And you can actually use that to connect to QnA Maker and still get knowledge if you want to in a sort of scalable and robust way. Now, once you have your architecture done and you've built your language model, you've done some testing on some workflows, some knowledge, all that stuff, you need to decide where you want to put your bot. Now, this session was titled, Chatbots and Microsoft Teams Made Simple, but actually there's a lot of channels within the Azure bot service. So you can choose to put your bot in Teams, or that same bot can be put into SharePoint, or it could be put into any other portal within Office 365 that is able to be logged into with your O365 account. So that really comes down to like Dynamics 365. You're able to drop these bots into anything that any portal within the O365 or M365 experience that's editable by you. So if you can add a web part in SharePoint or an SPFX web part to have a little pop-up, you have the control to drop that bot in there. Dynamics, sort of same deal. Teams is one of the simplest, actually, ways to launch a bot, because once you add that channel within the bot in Azure, you then can basically download a package and install it into your Teams tenant, share it with your colleagues or just some colleagues, depending on who needs to use it. Now that experience is actually the internal or authenticated experience. So the bot actually knows who you are. It has full access to AAD. It knows everything about you from your card within Active Directory. So that could include your name, that could include a nickname, your phone number, your office location, but it also has full access to the Microsoft Graph. Very powerful, because in that situation, you can grab pieces of information like common documents that you're using, people you interact with a lot, and it also has things like your manager. As long as you're using the hierarchy list or setup within Azure Active Directory, that makes approvals really easy, because if the approval process is required to go through your manager, you don't have to put in a name. You can put in that placeholder of saying grab person's manager and have this go through a request process. The other option is going to be an external experience. Basically, this is like those websites that you see when you log or when you open up a website and you see a little pop-up on the bottom right and it says, how can we help you? And it's sort of these days it's 50-50 whether it's a human being or if it's a chatbot. And that's going to be what you would see here. The other big one is going to be Facebook Messenger and SMS or text messaging. You can actually deploy these bots. The kind of cool thing is you can have the same bot deployed in all three places, and as long as the contextual experience is the same or makes sense, you can not have to make any changes and have that bot deployed in three places. Now that probably wouldn't make the most sense to have both a bot that responds in Facebook Messenger and SMS, because SMS has a text character limit. So you probably want to be shorter, a little more brief in your responses from the bot in that situation, but you do have the ability to do that, no problem. But the big takeaway here, especially since this is Commsverse and Microsoft Teams is really the center of our attention. Teams is sort of that home base for Azure bots, and I think that's a big takeaway here. So you're able to install this. It is available now on all platforms, all major platforms for your employees. So internally, you can use these as tools for them, whether they work at their desk all day or if they're in the field all day. They're able to use their mobile device and get through there. So I'm going to run a quick demo to show sort of a use case that most people can relate to and sort of makes sense. It's also just a really good way to capture some data that comes through when you use a tool like Lewis to really do that natural language processing. Fair warning, this is a video, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, I don't like to tempt the demo gods, of course, but also it's a lot easier to present and not have to chat at the same time. So in this video you see here, I'm talking to a bot that's called Ask HR. It's in Microsoft Teams, and you'll see that you have to have, or you should have at least, a way to sort of give a virtual knock on the door. So you saw a hi there, you want to have a helpful response. And then the user in this case, the user is a brand new employee, wants to do some scheduling ahead of time on requesting some time off. So user is named Bill, wants to ask about how much vacation time he gets every year. He didn't ask about sick time. He didn't ask about time off. He didn't ask about a general or vague term. He specifically said vacation time. So you'll see the first response that comes back. This is coming from QnA Maker, and I'll show you what that looks like in the background in a little bit. He gets a response that shows how much time off he's going to get based on how long he's been at the company. Now, this response is a little bit long, kind of a little bit detailed. It could have been something where it actually looks up in the HRIS and says, hey, this is user X. How many hours does this person have, and how many hours will they have 2 months from now, if that was the question. But this is a good example where QnA Maker was absolutely sufficient, being able to answer this question. And you can see the last thing that was included was a link to the employee handbook. So this user could have gone and looked up in SharePoint and found this document and gone there. But why waste that person's time when you could just say, nope, this is the document. This also helps you get around the process of dealing with rot of your documents and files within SharePoint or within your content management system, because a lot of times people leave those files even though they're outdated. So let's say maybe the top search result for the employee handbook is actually the version from 2017. People just click it because it doesn't say handbook 2017, it just says employee handbook. If somebody wasn't not smart enough, but like responsible enough to delete that file is now corrupting search results all throughout. Well, in this case, you can actually help those people, or at least somebody, by setting a vetted correct answer that always points to the right link. So it's kind of a nice, easy way to get around some of that issue where rot within your search system is actually something you can't do a whole lot about. You can optimize search all day long, but if those users that own those documents don't do something with them and you aren't there to clean them up, you don't have to deal with it moving forward because you actually have a clean way of doing it. So let's say Bill got the answer he wants. He now wants to figure out, he wants to go forward and actually request some time off. So in this case, he says, I want to schedule some time off. So he actually said that in a reasonably vague way. And he gets this really nice adaptive card as a response. Adaptive cards are a way to provide forms and displays without having to necessarily code. They are JSON, but it's all drag and drop. Again, I don't develop, and I was able to make this no problem. The calendar experience is all built in. It's just really, really nice. We submit that form once Bill's cleared that through. We get a nice confirmation saying, hey, here's some context to your request. I'm going to send it to your manager, and you'll hear back from me when this is done. Now, in the real world, this would probably take 5 days or more, but in demo world, this takes maybe 5 seconds. So we send back a contextual, congratulations confirmation that Lisa said yes, because in demo world, you always get your vacation time allowed. And that goes through the process now of confirming, letting you know, and then because there could have been conversations between the request and the confirmation, which is why we want to be contextual, keep that in mind, and then a nice little receipt. So this is another adaptive card. This is actually a display card. The earlier one was a form card. In that case, you're entering information. In the display card, you're not. You'll notice that it provides some information about the experience here, which is basically just, dropping in a bunch of specific data that came from the request. That image at the top is also now specific to vacation time request because Bill asked about taking time off, which in our company is actually too vague to make a decision because we also have sick time, maybe bereavement, maybe jury duty time off. So you can see though this nice confirmation with some buttons that can potentially bring you along to the next workflow that is relevant to the situation. So maybe you want to make yourself unavailable in your Outlook calendar. Maybe you want to set up your out of office reply automatically based on the information that was provided. Or maybe you want to cancel that request or change it. Now, let's say he wants to go through and be a little more specific. Before he said, I want to request some time off. In this case, he says, I'm going to request a vacation time June 8th to June 12th. You can actually use this now to pre-populate the fields. And in some cases, you could actually choose to not even send this as a confirmation because as long as that information that was required for the form was provided and Lewis was able to grab it, no problem. It can just go forward with that. So that I think is a really good example of how Lewis works because in this case, Lewis is able to identify the intent. I want to request time off. That's the intent. That's what I'm asking for. Whether it's sick time or vacation time or something else, that's what I'm doing. And it can also grab details about that request. So in this case, it was the dates. And then the second time he went through and asked about taking time off, he said, I want to take vacation from date X to date Y. And he was able to pull that through directly. And Lewis didn't have to do any sort of, major lifting to make that be known. And that intent, the content of that and the little pieces of data from the form, basically the vacation or sick time and the date range, those are pieces of data that are essentially variables in Lewis that are passed over to the workflow. So the workflow has it to work with it throughout the entire process of the logic running, which is super powerful because you don't have to go through and necessarily say, how do I do X or, go through some sort of portal. In many organizations, this type of time off request would be in an HRIS, something like ADP or SAP or even like in Dynamics or an ERP software like that. So a lot of cool things and opportunities there. If we jump into the background and actually look at what's behind the scenes, this is what QnA Maker looks like. Now, this isn't the exact one that you just saw in the demo, but it shows you some examples. You basically have a question on the left that is just one column, all your questions. Each row is called a QnA pair, and the cell on the left, the question cell for that pair, will have as many different phrasings as you can possibly provide. You are seeding this information to throw the net out as wide as possible to be able to answer that question. And on the right side is the answer with your responses and preferably a link to a resource for more information so that somebody can look up for ask or find out more detail if necessary, or provide some actions to take. QnA Maker is very, very simple, actually. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about it because it just works. It's really good at what it does as long as you provide it with good seed information. And it's sort of like a search engine on steroids, but you can basically point people to the correct search result without having to deal with the sort of the nature of search being unpredictable based on the user. Now, if we talk about Lewis, the Lewis experience is similar to QnA Maker. Instead of having the two columns, it really only has the one, and that's going to be the different utterances is what Lewis calls it, the different ways and different phrasing that you can say the same thing. So you can see in this I have, I need to take some time off. I want to take a vacation. Can I take some personal leave? I want a few days off. My child is sick and I need to stay home. This is all the same intent. I'm taking time off. That's it. But there's a lot of different ways to say it. So you want to provide as many utterances as you can that covers all the bases, all the different ways and vernaculars that you might have said that internally in your organization. It's great for dealing with, let's say, common words or like I don't know, specific terms and terminology and buzz phrases that you say at your organization, you can cover those so that this can actually run with that. That includes acronyms. Every place I've ever worked for or consulted for always claims that, oh, geez, we're just so overwhelmed with acronyms. We're just, out of this world. Nobody could be nearly as bad as us. Everybody is as bad as everybody else. Acronyms are everywhere. The fact is you can drop acronyms in here, spell them out, include them the way that people use them, and you can actually cover all of that. Now, one of the things you see here is these blue terms. These are those things that would match the form fields. In Lewis, we call these entities, and it's basically a way to variabilize the content that's coming in. So you can say, okay, anytime somebody says sick, ill, illness, not feeling well, that means they're asking for sick time, period. If you want, vacation, PTO, personal time, whatever the terminology is that you use internally, those can mean vacation time. And if somebody says something very vague, like I want time off, in that case, it will just come through as the entity was not provided. So that's when you have that adaptive card asking you for, to choose the radio buttons between the two. So I'm going to take a brief moment just to see if we have any questions. I don't think we do. I will point out, and I should have said this at the beginning, if you have questions, I'm going to have time at the end, but also if you want to bother me or interrupt me during the session, by all means, please do. Happy to answer them. Just know that there is a brief delay in how live events works in Teams, so I don't see them immediately. I'll see them a little bit later, but I will stop back in here in a little bit to make sure if there are questions, I can definitely get to them. Now let's jump into another quick demo. This one is information technology support. You're going to see a lot of concepts for customer service, customer support, tech support for bots. That is really sort of the entryway, the gateway for a lot of organizations. In this case, the bot is actually being deployed to SharePoint, because why not, right? I told you earlier, you can put your bot either in Teams, SharePoint, Dynamics, elsewhere, but let's say this is one of those bots that pops up on the screen. We got a beautiful, new communication site within the information technology site here, but the person doesn't want to go looking for some information. In this case, they want to print at a printer, back when people actually worked in offices. So we have the pop-up. Again, this could be something that shows up in Microsoft Teams if you wanted it to, but in this case, let's say people live in SharePoint. The user's asking, hey, I want to connect to a network printer. So the bot's going to go through some questions. Hey, do you want to do black and white, color? Take your pick there. And then the Bill can come back with an answer there. And then based on knowing some Azure AD information about this user, the bot can say, okay, do you want to print where you work or do you want to print elsewhere? Maybe you're traveling, maybe you're printing to a colleague. And then which floor do you want to print on? We only have floors 7 and 8 in the New York office. And then it can go do a query and actually come back and say, good, I found these printers that match your requirements. And here's some instructions on how to connect to a printer. Now, in this case, it's instructions. It actually has a link to the Windows, the Microsoft page on how to connect to a printer on Windows, but you could actually run a PowerShell script and actually install it directly to their PC if you wanted to. And then after a little bit of time to see if it worked, or a little bit of time to let the user try, you can see whether or not it actually worked. So in this case, Bill says yes, it did work, and okay, great, bot will close it out. All that time in the background, though, we've actually been doing something separate, which is using, in this case, we use ServiceNow just to show, the IT ticket that opened up. The first step of this process was actually opening a ticket. Even before asking, did the user want to use black and white or color, the bot opened up a ticket, called it a standard ticket type, user asking to connect to printer, and that it was a bot originating ticket. This ticket will never be seen by a human unless the person is having trouble actually getting connected and needs to raise the ticket to the human level. But IT still gets all of the glory of the credit showing that they did this, that they are still providing services. It's just automated in this case. So you can see here it was solved because when Bill was asked if he was able to get connected to the printer, he said yes. Had he said no, that could then go through some troubleshooting steps. And then maybe some more troubleshooting steps if he still couldn't get there. And maybe every response he sends back goes through some sentiment analysis within Azure, which is another service that comes from the cognitive services. In that situation, if he sends back something perhaps not so positive, the bot can understand that and say, oh, never mind, let me get you in touch with a person. And it can be raised to a human, or this ticket here can be categorized to a category that a human actually sees. And then it would keep a track of all the different troubleshooting steps that we went through. So in this case, you only see 2 activities, but it could be 5, maybe, who knows? So a lot of cool opportunity there to have some fun. Another quick demo is the idea of expense reporting. I think most of us hate doing that. A lot of us are not traveling nearly as much as we used to, but that being said, we still might have expenses that we have to pay for. So this is a really easy one where you can do this on mobile. So let's say that you're using Microsoft Teams and you have your iPhone out and you just got, let's say, a coffee at Starbucks. So you open up your bot on your mobile device while you're waiting for that coffee. It's not even made yet and you're able to do this. And you can use natural language to say something like, I spent X dollars or X euro or X yen or whatever your currency is, doesn't matter. You can make it formatted to take whatever it is on breakfast today. In this case, I didn't provide an option to like clarify or confirm what I wanted because I'm just going to go with it. And I actually said I spent currency and meal. Those are the two things that were part of basically that, and the date, but the date is a known. I can get the date just by the conversation. And then submit a photo of the receipt with it. And I can just throw the receipt out when I'm done. I get my coffee and I throw my receipt out. Now this has to go someplace. So let's say that you want to send it to, an online portal or something like that. Concur, which is literally something I think everybody I've ever worked with does not like doing, having to go to that portal and go to do their expenses in Concur. This can be a one-off thing where you send it to there. Now in this example, I actually just connected directly to SharePoint because why not? It's got a great Power Automate connector. All these workflows or all these chat experiences you saw were essentially, we're just Power Automate workflows. So you have a nice built-in SharePoint connection. So you can see I can keep track of the title, breakfast, lunch, dinner, the date, who sent it, and then the workflow itself looks like this. Now it doesn't have to be with, you've seen the name AtBot a few times, that's the product that I work on. Doesn't need to be that. If you want to build a, an Azure function that connects to Power Automate to trigger this, to let other people use Power Automate workflows to connect to your bots, by all means go for it. But you can see here I had messages going back and forth. I had file uploads to SharePoint. I had property updates based on the Lewis information that was brought through, and you're able to use that throughout the workflow to update that information. And you always have those entities, and even the Lewis message that comes through is available to you in the workflow, so you know what's coming through. Now, looking at this in a big picture format, sort of the bigger question that I get when I talk about chatbots to organizations that are not really familiar with the technology yet, I always get the question of the use case. Why would I want this? Why would I want this? A lot of the stuff that we do these days, whether it's in a CRM, whether it's in an IT ticketing system, whether it's just document generation, that stuff is automated because we're using cloud technologies, but it's not necessarily automated because if it's manual for somebody on the administrative side or somebody on the employee side, I guess, if they have to go in and actually make updates, that's not so automated really. So you will see sort of the I used the word gateway earlier. That's sort of what we see here is for tech support and customer service. So those two big ones that a lot of organizations are going to see. So if you can think of, calling a hotel chain, you're usually going to get that phone tree. That's essentially a chatbot, but it's a pre-recorded voice saying something to you. Sometimes you actually will hear a Siri-like or an Alexa-like voice, and it's actually reading text. But a lot of places are still running with a system that is a human recorded every different potential permutation of words that would be stated, and that's there. It's essentially the same concept in technology, but this is much more accessible because you can actually do it yourself. Before you would have to go out and purchase a huge package and pay a lot of money for it, but you can sort of do this yourself now. So tech support internally, IT, let's say, maybe facilities, you need to put in a request for a new desk or to move your items because you're going to a new office. Customer service for any sort of FAQs or standard tier 0 type of support types of things. Marketing, being able to connect to certain tools like HubSpot or I don't know, Dynamics, even has some of its own marketing aspects in there. Hootsuite, Facebook, things like that. And you're able to actually schedule and push things out, potentially even read the comments that are coming in on your social media for marketing purposes and actually post things based on responses that you see or whatever the mood is from people. Human resources is a big one because that organization always gets the most questions repeated over and over and over again, and a lot of them are reasonably, I'll say, simple. The policies might be complex, but the answers are simple and there's not so many of them versus in tech support, it could be like anything went wrong. So human resources, especially in the HR team, it's never bad to be on the good side of the HR team. So if you can provide them a way to, kick off or answer typical questions, kick off the process of onboarding somebody, posting a job requisition, offboarding somebody for whichever reasons, that's really big. And then you're going to see knowledge management folks are going to love this because it means people can go to something that actually has pre-written vetted responses. BPI and Lean Six Sigma people are going to love this because it means people actually have to sit down and like draw out their workflows probably for the first time ever. And once you actually identify what your workflow is, that's a major win just by itself. And then you can take somebody who has a little bit more technical savviness and they can go in and automate the workflows and apply them to your bots. Accounting and finance, I just showed the ability to upload a receipt and track your information there. But let's say you want to do any other sort of reimbursements or contracts or estimates, things like that. RFPs, maybe there's a standard RFP process and you want to put it out that way. And of course, my favorite is I just want to find the menu on a restaurant's website. Why can't I just have a chatbot there for me to ask, where's your menu for Sunday brunch, right? Now, that's sort of big picture and not necessarily real world. It's not a case study. One I will mention, and I don't say this because I get paid, unfortunately, but I'm a customer for Bank of America. I live in the U.S. Bank of America is one of the biggest banks here in the United States, and I happen to use this. And I noticed a couple years ago when they rolled out this new bot called Erica. Get it? Bank of Erica. It is reasonably good. I'm actually pretty pleasantly surprised, especially when I had to go through and make some address changes when I moved a couple years ago at the time it came out. The one downside was they had these stanchions in the brick and mortar stores where when you walked by it, the bot would start talking to you, which was weird as hell. But that being said, the product itself in the app was good. So let me actually show you what it looks like. So if I log into Bank of America's app on my phone and I go through and I want to contact this bot. The bot shows up in the bottom right. It's always there. It's ever present. Like they are pushing real hard on this so that they don't have to answer questions via a human. I went through and I said, okay, I want to get a certificate of deposit. I want to put my money into a bank and get some return on it because interest rates are so low elsewhere in other bank accounts. And you can see as I go through the process here that it actually brings me to the right place. Imagine in the app, I had to go find the CD page and hope that I get to the right one. Well, this is vetted. It knows where it's supposed to take you based on what kind of account you are, who you are, or the information it has about you. And it can go through this automated web page where I can actually have a CD, created, potentially transferred from money that I have in my account, and I'm good to go right there. So you want to see a good experience here is, especially for these guys, is that they have some questions and answers in the chat, but then they bring you right to the tool that already does the work. So you're getting more value out of the services and tools that you've already built and the ones that you've already invested in. So it just gets people from point A to point B without having to search around or hope they're in the right place or say, I think I'm in the right place. I got the number that I wanted, but I don't know if it's accurate. So I need to go call the bank or visit the bank. And they don't want you to do that, right? They want to save that time for something else or something more high end. So these services, as you get into them, think about how much time you're saving people internally, how much automation is really improving the amount of productivity and efficiency you have, things like that. A little bit more sort of day-to-day for most organizations though, I think forms is going to be a really big opportunity for you. I think the real win for forms moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a mixture of, at least in the space of being on a Microsoft stack type of organization, is a mixture of a chatbot experience with Power Apps and Power Automate. Now, this is a good opportunity for you to get out of the concept of using InfoPath and SharePoint Designer because you only have so much time left. Now, given some of the delays on other tools, due to COVID, this 2026 timeframe might push out a little bit, but I wouldn't bank your entire workflow processes on that. And the forms aspect here is, I showed you the example of the bot being able to fill out the time off request. That's a form, right? It could have been more complex if necessary, if there are some more pieces of input that are required, but it doesn't have to be. So for the simple forms, the bot can be the place where you go to get your request in. Now, if you think about, well, if I think about a lot of the places that I've worked for or with, they have either one big central web page on their intranet that is the forms page, or each department has their own and there's no organization to it. It's just kind of one-off. If somebody tried to organize it once, they did a good job and then things kind of whittled down or became messy again years later. The bot can be that central place that brings you to the place, or the central endpoint that brings you to the places that you need to go. Either you fill out the form directly in the bot if the form is reasonably simple, or it points you to the correct place where that more complex form is. And those more complex forms are the ones you're going to see in a tool like Power Apps. So build those apps, don't hold back, and every time a new one gets added, add that to the number of intents that you have within the workflow or within the bot to say, okay, now I want to sign up for my my healthcare. In the U.S., you have to do benefits elections every year, so I want to do that. I want to get my life insurance set up. I want to do blah 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 blah. That can then point to any new forms that have been created recently, and if there are no forms for that, the answer can be, if there is not a form for this, please call the HR representative at this phone number or send an email or whatever else. So kind of a cool a way to centralize all that information, and as things get better, add more and more and more and more. The thing about your bot is it's basically a living document. It does not just die at the end. Now, I'm going to kind of close up here and close out a tad. I want to show you some good resources that you have ahead of you here. First being a really cool project I worked on with an AI MVP out of Austria. His name is Stefan Bisser. He was able to put together sort of a periodic table of Office 365 for Azure Cognitive Services. So in this case, it's the table of Azure Cognitive Services. I only talked about 2 cognitive services today. One was language understanding and the other was QnA Maker. There are more than a dozen other ones out there on speech, on language, on vision. Very cool stuff. Take a look at that. And on search. And you want to start looking into this stuff because it can have some real powerful implications within your workflows. And essentially, that closes us out on this concept that you have that new paradigm ahead of you, which gives you that many more skills to learn along the process and along the way. And you're going to, find some job security out of this, actually, because I think as more and more repeatable tasks become automated, those jobs are going to be redistributed elsewhere, but the job of building those tasks into being automated solutions are going to become that much more valuable. And I think it's something to start getting your hands into now. If you don't have the ability to do it at work day to day, get a trial tenant. Go, play with Azure on your own. Some of these services are incredibly cheap. So even after you expend the $200 trial on a new Azure tenant, put your credit card in, and every time you make a Lewis call, it's like 0.000015 US cents. It's peanuts. Now, if you want to move forward and actually play around with this, I know the sessions for this conference are going to be uploaded and shared within the Teams experience. If you want to get these slides right now, you can get this session at the first link there. All the demos that I showed you, you can actually build yourself for free using AtBot in Microsoft Teams. You don't have to pay for anything to do that, so feel free to do it. The link that I have there provides you all the files necessary to get going, including the workflows, the Lewis apps, cool things like that, and then a bunch of other best practices and documentation that either I wrote or Microsoft has that I really like. On top of that, if you're interested in some more M365 information into the future, I will be speaking tomorrow. Yes, so tomorrow at 10 p.m. my time, Eastern Daylight Time. It is actually the Singapore lineup, so it'll be Wednesday at 10 a.m. Feel free to join my Everyday Guide to Microsoft 365 groups. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you juggle the Outlook, Yammer, Teams experience all together, and a lot of opportunity there, so feel free. And with that, I just want to say thank you for attending, definitely. If you're interested in leaving some feedback, there is a very large QR code here. You can just hold up the camera on your phone, whether it's iOS or Android, it'll just work, and it'll open up a link for you to leave feedback to let me know how I did, to let the Commsverse people know whether it's worth inviting me back next year or ever. And to contact me all these different ways, feel free to reach out via email if you have any questions. I am here for, one-off consulting or any sort of, insights or thoughts or, reviews, that kind of thing, by all means. And I'm going to jump back over to Teams to see if there are any questions here. All right. So I think we're good on questions. There were no ones that I see popped up that were specific to this. I will just say, once again, please leave feedback. And just after this for a few minutes, I will jump into the breakout room for this. And I think that's more of a Teams meeting experience where we can actually chat. But I do have to run to something right after that. So if you want to join me there, I am going to say thank you again for attending. And the link right now is in the Q&A tab. So if you jump into the Q&A pane in the live event in Teams right now, you'll see a link that Adam left. And thank you, Adam, very much for producing today and keeping all of this stuff working while I don't have to think about it. Go ahead and click that link and I'll join in. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them live for a few minutes before I have to duck out. So thank you all once again.